I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Mike, and I've been with Emily for about 3 years now. We met in college, hit it off pretty quickly, and everyone told us we were the perfect couple. I believed that too, until the last couple of weeks. Things started feeling off, little signs I ignored at first. Emily was more distant, seemed distracted when we were together, and she kept canceling plans saying she was busy with work when I knew she was. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I mean, who doesn't get caught up in work stress, right? But then came the day I found out I was wrong. That morning I woke up early for no reason and I decided to clean up around the house. Nothing special, just tidying up the living room, doing some laundry. I happened to glance at her phone, just a quick look, nothing malicious. I wasn't snooping, really. But I saw a message from her childhood best friend, James. It wasn't a typical, "Hey, how you doing?" kind of message. It was more intimate, like they were trying to hide something. The last message was something about meeting up and finally doing what we've always wanted. That made my stomach drop. I didn't even know she and James had anything like that going on. I thought they were just friends, the kind of friends you grew up with. I couldn't believe my eyes. I sat there staring, trying to process what I'd just read. My mind raced. How long has this been going on? Was it just a one-time thing, or had they been sneaking around for months? My heart started pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. Then I saw her coming out of the bathroom, acting like nothing was wrong. I wanted to ask her about the message, but I couldn't speak. My brain was a jumble of anger, betrayal, and confusion. I just stared at her, trying to hold it together. She looked at me and smiled, that fake, bitchy smile she uses when she's annoyed or hiding something. "What's up?" she asked, acting like I wasn't a bomb waiting to explode. That's when I knew she'd been lying this whole time. That's when I decided I'd find out the truth. I needed to. See her, hear her, catch her in the act if I could. I started paying closer attention to her every move, every text, every secret glance. Over the next few days, I noticed she was acting even more distant, sneaking around her phone more than usual. She was constantly on edge, her eyes darting everywhere when I came near. She'd lie when I asked where she'd been or who she was talking to. It became clear she was hiding something, but I needed concrete proof. I started digging, hacking into her social media accounts, going through her emails. I wasn't proud of it, but I felt like I had no choice. And then one night I finally caught her. I came home early, something I rarely do, and I found her in our bedroom, her hand on James's face, lips pressed together in a kiss. She froze when she saw me. That moment, I swear, my world stopped. My wife, my future wife, cheating on me with her childhood best friend. Someone I used to think was just a guy she grew up with, someone she trusted. She looked at me, the embarrassment and anger mixed in her eyes, and tried to lie her way out. She told me they were just old friends catching up, that it didn't mean anything, that I was overreacting, but I saw it all. I saw the betrayal, the lie, the way she'd been sneaking around behind my back for who knows how long. That was the moment everything changed. I felt my stomach churn, my skin crawl. I was furious, heartbroken, and honestly, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this to me after everything? After we promised to be honest and true? How could she betray me so deeply right before our wedding, right when we were supposed to be starting our lives together? It was like my whole world was crumbling in that instant. I didn't even know what to say or do. I just stood there staring at her and James, realizing I'd been blind to all the signs, blinded by love and trust. Now all I could feel was this burning need for answers and revenge. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept replaying the scene over and over in my head, her frozen face, the kiss, the way she tried to deny. It was like a punch to the stomach every time I remembered. I felt betrayed on every level, by her, by James, even by myself for not seeing the signs earlier. I kept asking myself, how could she lie to my face? How could she pretend everything was fine while she was sneaking around with her childhood best friend? The anger started bubbling up, but beneath that there was this crushing sadness. I'd trusted her. I'd believed she was the one I was gonna spend my life with. And now I felt like I didn't even know her at all. I knew I had to confront her again. I couldn't just let this slide. So the next morning I woke up early, still furious, and sat her down. I told her I knew everything, The messages, the kiss, the lies. Her face twisted like she was trying to come up with some excuse, some reason why she'd done this. And honestly, I expected her to break down, to beg or cry or whatever. But instead, she just looked at me with that bitchy smirk and said, "Oh, please, Mike. You're overreacting. It's just sex and it doesn't mean anything. James is just a friend and I was just bored, okay? You're acting like I just slept with the guy or something. Get real." That was the moment I realized she was a master manipulator. She kept spinning her lies, acting like I was the crazy one. Her bitchy attitude, her constant denial, it all made me even angrier. How could she lie so easily? How could she treat this like it was just some minor slip-up? I felt my blood boiling, but I stayed calm. I told her that I couldn't stay with someone who lied and cheated, that I deserved better than a wife who was screwing around with her childhood best friend. She rolled her eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was just jealous and insecure. But deep down, I knew I was. I knew she had been unfaithful and she was lying to cover her ass. That night, I couldn't sleep. All I could think about was the betrayal, the way she'd lied, the way James had betrayed me too. It felt like I'd lost everything I cared about. I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? How could she do this after promising me she loved me, after I gave her my heart? I felt stupid, naive, and betrayed. I didn't want to believe she'd do this to me, but I had to face the facts. She wasn't the person I thought she was. She was selfish, manipulative, and willing to cheat on me with her childhood best friend just because she was bored or whatever excuse she threw out. I started planning my next move. I knew I couldn't stay in this relationship anymore, not with someone who lied and cheated so easily. But I also knew I had to make her pay somehow. I wanted her to feel what I felt, humiliated, betrayed, and broken. I didn't want some messy breakup. I wanted a proper revenge. I wanted her to see that she couldn't just lie, cheat, and get away with it. That's when I started thinking about how to do it, how to ruin her, but more importantly, how to make her understand that her actions had consequences. Because right now, she was acting like she was invincible, like she could do whatever she wanted and I'd still be waiting for her at the end. Well, I was done waiting. I was done being the fool, and I was going to show her just how deep her betrayal cut me. Over the next few days, I kept my distance from Emily, but inside, I was like a volcano ready to erupt. My mind kept racing, trying to figure out the best way to confront her, but honestly, I was also planning something more calculated. I didn't just want to break up with her and walk away. I wanted her to suffer, to see that her betrayal wasn't going to be swept under the rug. I needed her to understand that I was no fool, that I was capable of turning the tables in ways she'd never expect. I started gathering evidence, more messages, some photos I found on her phone, even tracking her whereabouts with a GPS app I installed secretly. I wasn't proud of invading her privacy, but at this point, I felt like I had no choice. If she was going to lie and deny, I needed proof to back up my accusations. I wanted her to realize that I knew everything, that I was paying attention, and I knew with certainty that I had to set a trap, one that would expose her fully and make her regret ever crossing that line. One evening, I decided to invite her out for dinner, pretending I still wanted to talk things over. She was her usual bitchy self, throwing snide comments and acting like she didn't care. I played along, but I was already planning my move. I told her I had something important to say, that I was done with the games, that I knew she'd been lying and I was ready to walk away. She rolled her eyes, but I could see a flicker of something in her eyes, fear maybe, or anger. I couldn't tell for sure, but I knew I had her right where I wanted her. Later that night, I confronted her again, pulling out all the evidence I'd collected. I laid it out, screenshots, texts, the photos. Her reaction was a mix of anger, denial, and outright contempt. She scoffed, said I was crazy, said I was paranoid. She tried to gaslight me, telling me I was imagining things, that James was just a friend and I was overreacting. But I had enough. I told her I didn't want to hear her lies anymore, that I was done being played the fool. I told her I knew about the affair and I wanted her to come clean. Her bitchy attitude only got worse. She snapped at me, called me insecure, accused me of not trusting her, all that typical crap. but I could see the cracks in her facade. She was scared, furious, and desperate to keep her lies intact. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not without a fight. I told her I was done, that I wanted her out of the house. I wasn't going to stay with a woman who betrayed me, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. But I didn't want to just kick her out without making her feel the consequences. I wanted her to see that her actions had consequences, that I was serious. So I started planning my revenge, something slow, something that would make her regret ever crossing that line. I knew she was a bitch, but I also knew she was selfish and manipulative. I could use that. I could turn her own tactics against her. I started by cutting off her access to money, her phone, her social media. I wanted her to feel vulnerable, isolated. Then I arranged for some of her closest friends, people she trusted, to find out what she'd been up to. I wanted her to understand that her betrayal wasn't just between us. It was out in the open now, and everyone knew she was a liar and a cheat. I wasn't planning anything violent or extreme, but I wanted her to see that I was capable of making her regret her choices. I wanted to hit her where it hurt, the reputation she so desperately tried to protect, her ego, her sense of control. Because honestly, she'd been acting like she was invincible, but I was about to bring her down a notch or two. And let me tell you, the feeling of finally turning the tables, seeing her panic, her anger, her helplessness, was cathartic. It made me realize how much I'd been holding in, how much I'd been betrayed. I'd always believed in honesty and trust, but that night, I saw clearly that some people only want to manipulate and betray. And I was done being the victim. From that moment on, I knew I'd find a way to make her pay, even if it took everything I had. That's what revenge is really about, making sure she understands that every lie, every betrayal comes with a cost. The days that followed were a blur of planning and execution. I didn't want her to see what I was doing right away. No, I had to be subtle, calculated. I kept my cool and pretended everything was still normal, but inside I was more focused than ever. I started by changing the passwords to her social media accounts, deleting some messages, and making sure she had no way to hide her tracks. I even set up a fake email account to send her mock messages, making it seem like someone else knew about her affair and was about to expose her. The goal was to make her nervous, to put her on edge so she'd slip up. I also talked to some of her friends. I told them a version of the truth, just enough to make them suspicious but not enough to blow everything. I wanted her to feel like her entire world was crumbling, that her lies were catching up with her. It was satisfying watching her paranoia grow, realizing she was losing control of her carefully built facade. She started acting even more bitchy and defensive, snapping at me over small things, accusing me of spying on her. But I just kept calm, knowing I was inching closer to my goal. One evening, I arranged a surprise visit to her favorite bar where I'd been talking to some of her friends. I wanted her to see that everyone was starting to question her. When she arrived, she looked furious, trying to play it cool, but I caught the nervous glances she threw around. I stood just outside, pretending I didn't care, watching her interact with her friends. The whispers started and I could see her tense up. She knew her world was unraveling. That moment was some kind of victory for me. I'd made her feel exposed, vulnerable, and exposed her to her closest allies. But I wasn't done yet. I knew I needed to push harder to make her understand that her lies couldn't save her anymore. So I told her I was going to confront James, the one she kept lying about. I wanted to see her reaction, whether she'd deny everything or finally admit the truth. I arranged to meet James at a coffee shop, pretending to be just a concerned friend. When I sat down across from him, I saw the guilt in his eyes. I made sure to record the conversation just in case I needed more proof. We talked, and he admitted they'd been seeing each other for months. That was the final piece of the puzzle. When I got home, I confronted Emily again. I played the recordings for her, James admitting everything, the texts, the photos I had secretly taken over the past week. Her face went pale, then red with rage. She tried to deny it, tried to throw every excuse in the book. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. I was bored. It wasn't real. But I didn't care anymore. I just looked at her and said, "You lied to my face, you betrayed everything we ever promised. You thought you could get away with this, but now everyone knows. You're not the innocent girl you pretended to be." Her bitchy attitude cracked, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. That night I decided to take control. I told her she needed to leave. I was done with her lies, her manipulation. I wanted her out of my house, out of my life. I wanted her to feel what I'd been feeling: humiliation, regret, loss, and I was going to make sure she did. I set her up with a few of her things packed, handed her some cash, and told her she was no longer welcome. She tried to argue, called me crazy, said I was overreacting. But I just looked at her and said, "You made your choice. Now live with it." Watching her walk out that door, realizing I had finally turned the tide, that was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I knew she'd never forget what she did, and I was finally starting to heal from that crushing betrayal. The days after she left felt like I was waking up from a nightmare I couldn't fully escape. For a while, I just sat in the house, stunned, trying to make sense of everything. The betrayal hit harder than I ever expected. I'd loved her. I'd trusted her with everything. And she'd used that trust as a weapon to cheat behind my back with James, her childhood best friend. It was surreal to realize how deeply I'd been fooled. I kept asking myself what I did wrong, but deep down I knew it wasn't my fault. She was just a bitch who couldn't keep her promises, who lied and manipulated her way through her own life. I threw myself into cleaning up the mess. I changed the locks, canceled her access to everything, and cut ties with her friends who still tried to defend her. The more I cut her out, the clearer it became that I was finally reclaiming control. I started focusing on myself, on healing. I went to therapy, not just to cope but to process everything. How someone I loved could betray me so easily, how I'd let myself be blinded for so long. It was a rough process, but I knew I had to get through it if I ever wanted to move forward. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on her, just enough to see if she was trying to crawl back, if she'd realized what she lost. To my surprise, she did reach out a few times, trying to guilt-trip me, saying she was sorry but she didn't mean to hurt me. That only made me more certain I'd made the right decision. She was manipulative to the end, still trying to spin her lies. I saw her trying to play the victim, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I didn't want her fake apologies or her tears. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her actions. Eventually, I started dating again. Not because I wanted to forget her, but because I needed to remind myself that there was life beyond her betrayal. I met some new people, went out, and let myself feel human again. It wasn't easy. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and I still felt some sting whenever I thought about her or James. But I was learning to accept that some things are just over and that I deserved better. I didn't need her or her lies. I needed to focus on me and what I wanted for my future without her dragging me down. Looking back, I realize I learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and when someone betrays you like that, it leaves a scar. But I also learned that you can survive the worst, that you can turn betrayal into strength if you handle it the right way. The most important thing was realizing I didn't need her to be happy, that my life was still mine and I could rebuild it however I wanted. That's what I want others to know. No matter how deep the betrayal, you've got the power to rise above it. You just have to decide you're finished being the victim and start taking control again. Now, I spend most of my time focusing on myself. The house is quiet, but it's mine again. I don't wake up feeling sick to my stomach anymore. The betrayal still stings, but I've learned to live with it. More than that, I've learned to move past it. I sometimes wonder what she's doing now, if she ever truly regrets what she did or if she's just moved on to the next person to manipulate. Honestly, I don't care. What I care about is that I finally see clearly. I see her for what she really is, a bitch who lied, cheated, and thought she could get away with it. But I also see myself, stronger now, more aware of my worth. Looking back, I realize I was blinded by love and trust, and that made me vulnerable. But that vulnerability also taught me how to be cautious, how to protect myself from people like her. I learned that some betrayals run so deep that the only way to heal is to cut everything out, to start fresh and rebuild what was broken. I don't hold on to anger anymore. I've let it go. What I hold on to is the lesson, and the hope that someday I'll find someone who values honesty, loyalty, and respect. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Don't let betrayal define you. Yeah, it hurts like hell, but it's also a turning point. You get to decide whether you stay broken or you pick yourself up and rebuild. For me, that's what I did. I took control, I made her face her lies, and I moved forward. I still feel the sting sometimes, sure, but I refuse to let it hold me hostage. Life goes on, and I'm finally ready to face the future. Wiser, stronger, and with my head held high.